I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and in the summers we would go back to Canada. And I remember the first time I heard the word Michael Jackson. And the other dude, Boy George. So Michael Jackson and Boy George. I remember the feeling vividly. So I think it was a friend of mine, she was a girl, I'm like 6 or 7, huh? And she says, "Do you know who Michael Jackson is?" And I looked at her, I said, "No." And I felt an anguish. I'd never felt it before in my life. I felt, "What do you mean? Michael Jackson, what's Michael Jackson? What don't I know? Why don't I know it? What am I missing? Who is Michael Jackson?" I remember the feeling. I never felt this before in my life ever. Or at least not consciously, but nothing like this. It's like I got stung by something. Via that little girl, she was a few years older than me, maximum 8 years old, who was vibrating on something and spread it to me. So in Saudi Arabia, we didn't have a normal television. We live on a compound with the people of the same company. We had to go to school like everybody else, local school with the same people coming from the same part of the world. And the rest of the time we were outside. I don't know nothing about what's going on. We don't get Sesame Street. None of that arrives to Saudi Arabia. We'd get recordings once in a while on a VHS, or was it a beta, and maybe 2-3 episodes, and that's that. Besides Star Wars, which we had, I had no access to mainstream culture. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And I remember the sensation, the feeling of it when she brought it up to me, and how instantly I felt out of something. And I instantly felt that somehow my life was in danger. It's funny to say, because I was out of something. But I brushed it off pretty quickly because I didn't care. I was in Canada for, let's say, a week or two, and then I was going to go about my business, go back to Saudi Arabia and live our very unusual life, which was the life I knew. So it didn't affect me so much. But when we returned to Canada after our sojourn in Saudi Arabia, then all of that started to catch up to me. And that was, let's say, my conscious introduction to pop culture. So there's a few key words I've said. Number one, the effect of it is like a drug. So I was like more or less virgin. Didn't know who Michael Jackson was. We're 1986, 5, something like this. So meaning the scope and width of the modern culture today is infinitely greater. Back then everything is slow, very slow, right? In 1986, my father bought a CD, the first ones in Saudi Arabia. And the second edition of the Walkman, which was the first one he didn't want to buy. He wanted to buy the second one because it came with a radio. He was very happy about it. The second one. So the CDs were very new, and your average person didn't have access to any of this stuff yet. So I'm just kind of giving you context. So what we can take from this is that culture, especially Americana culture or modern culture, has an effect which threatens almost your life in a way. If you're out of it, it's like you don't exist. And that's exactly how I felt. So if I don't exist with my friends and peers, something's in me unstable. That's number one. Number two, it got injected in me. It's like an energetic mental drug, vibration. So we all know that sound is a vibration. When a person listens to a sound, they start to vibrate at that level, and that vibration is coming from the outside. It's not an inner sound. So it's the outer sound that is making its way through from the outside. The periphery starts to vibrate. Obviously, your skin goes through and goes to the core of your nervous system, and then imprints your nervous system. So that's a drug. And that person, that little girl, was vibrating at that level and spread that to me. And I remember vividly receiving it. I received it in the future when I was older, when I got in touch with hip hop for the first time. similarly, but this was the first time and had no clue nor any defense. And there's not anything my parents could have done, or any parents. All they had to say was the word Michael Jackson. It was like a mantra. Like if you say Om Namah Shiva, it's a mantra. In it, there was a power. Of course, the person was initiated to Michael Jackson. Had she not known Michael Jackson, never heard of Michael Jackson, she would not even know the words Michael Jackson. But had she read the word Michael Jackson, it would not have had the same effect. She had to be initiated by Michael Jackson via the sound that came through television or whatever cassette she had. So that vibration she had in her, and she spread it to me, and it attacked me. It affected me. It jumped into me like a thing, like Stranger Thing. It jumped from outside and attacked and tried to enter into me. At that moment, my time in Canada was very short-lived, and I was going to leave so I could brush it off, but it already had left its imprints on me. So that's the power of culture. That's the power of American culture. It's like a drug, literally like a drug. And when you start to study the music business, especially modern hip-hop industry, you understand that this is exactly what it's designed to do. It's a drug that is transmitted to sound that is there to condition the minds of the people who listen to it. And we'll get into this a little later on. So that was my introduction to pop mainstream culture. Keyword Michael Jackson. Now, I never became a fan of Michael Jackson until years later. Fan is a big word. Michael Jackson's an amazing talent, but I never got into the Michael Jackson thing like some people did. But it doesn't matter. It's the sound. I had a similar experience, and I think I've said it before in a previous video. I'm going to reiterate it for the fun of it. It's Madonna. So the summer, I came back from Saudi Arabia. Then we had our first, I guess it was in September. The next summer, so summer, I don't remember the year, let's say 1986, 7, something like this. My parents shipped me off to some kind of like summer camp for maybe 2 weeks in nature and whatnot. And we were in the car, some kind of like pickup truck with all the little kids there. And I'm not connected to culture. My parents do not care about culture. They're from Egypt. They are in their little worlds. They're in Egyptian culture, which they, of course, try to inject me with and have to a certain degree. So that is kind of new, and they were shielded from it, and I was protected from it because they didn't want this to enter into our world. But they can't stop it, couldn't stop it, just like your parents can't stop it. So I was in that little pickup truck, and that sound, La Isla Bonita from Madonna, came on from the front. I never heard of that. I said the story before, and I saw the ripple effect. So it goes from here, you know, let's say the speakers are in the truck, and we're at the back of the pickup, and it's just like carrying its wavelength. And the girls now, who seem to know the song, which I had never heard before, nor had any care for it, I started to see them shift before my eyes. I will never forget that either. And I remember saying, but I didn't cuss yet, I said, what the fuck is going on? But there was no fuck, but it was the same feeling. What's happening? What's going on? What's happening to everybody? So let's say the camp was 50, 60% women. So all the girls start to vibrate and start to like, something's changing their faces and their mannerism, and something's happening, and I never seen this before. And the guys around are kind of responding in a way. And then there was the camp counselors who are like mumbling lyrics. And something's happening in the song. Something's happening in the space. And that also left a profound effect on me as I start to realize that there are external forces that are completely modifying our behaviors. And I didn't totally understand that at the time, but I witnessed it. I felt it. And then once again, I had the same feeling. I felt left out. Everybody knew what it was. Everybody vibed on it. Everybody's having a moment, looking at each other, are all happy together. And here I am, the little immigrant son who just came from Saudi Arabia, who doesn't know what's going on, who's just like, what's going on, right? So being me, I'm not going to get into it. No, I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? But I remember the feeling again. I'm out of something. They're in, I'm out. And that sensation feels like a threat. I feel anxious because I don't know what's going on. And I feel external to it, and I don't know what to do. So that's my main introduction on the effects, especially of modern culture. Now this effect, what I just described is culture in general, everywhere, no matter where it is. But Americana culture, it's like spiked, even more so. It's like super enhanced. And it's like they understand the technology of it, and they used it with an agenda. Culture always has an agenda, and the agenda doesn't necessarily need to be evil, but there's an agenda which is to bring a certain cohesion between the people who have a common denominator. Americana culture had another agenda. We'll get into that a little later.